Hello, it is me, Iguri, and I am back with another episode thing. Ooh, it's thunder! Okay, about my life. So today, we're gonna talk about Dungeons and Dragons! Oh my gosh, I should get my books as props. Hang on. This has got all the dice in here, and you're like, Belle, that's not that much dice. And I'm like, you're right. That isn't that much dice. This much more dice. This much more dice. This much more dice. Alright, let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons a little bit. So, for full disclaimer, I worked for Wizards of the Coast in over the last summer, so I'm very biased. I started playing in 2015, which is 5 years ago, with a dungeon master who started in 2nd edition, and a bunch of my friends who had all played Dungeons & Dragons when they were children, but hadn't played in a while. Okay, that's a lie, I didn't play Dungeons & Dragons, I started doing tabletop role-playing games. Let's be clear. I started with the Dragon Age tabletop RPG, and that was very fun, I liked that a lot. There was something really magical about finally getting to, like, basically get to play Pretend again, but this time with dice. And it was really, really neat. I pretty much never stopped playing Pretend when I was little. My friends started growing out of it, I just started playing Pretend by myself in my house, writing stories about it. That's how I got my world letters. And in which I'd write letters for characters in my imaginary world, and then Dungeons and Dragons was just that, but with other people who like saw the same things that you did. And that was really cool. I also did theater for like 8 years, so Dungeons & Dragons was just a natural extension from that. And I say Dungeons & Dragons, and I do kind of mean tabletop RPGs, but Dungeons & Dragons specifically. After group drama dissolved that first Dragon Age group I was in, I then joined a Dungeons & Dragons group running a 3.5e game. 5e was out at the time, and none of us really cared. So I did a whole campaign with that, set in a semi-original world. It was, kind of like a kitchen sink, throw in whatever fantasy sort of setting you got there. It wasn't like a preset homebrew stuff, but it wasn't a homebrew. It was homebrew adventures, but like kind of preset universe-ish. So that was fun. And I really like 3.5e. I'm a huge fan of how much you have to think about your character builds and how much you have to plan ahead, and the DM was very kind and like ensured that we had opportunities to retcon, and well, I say retcon, I mean like rebuild our characters because it was our first time through, and he made everything available to us, so we had the opportunity to play basically anything in the system. And we also did a combo with Pathfinder stuff, so you could just do whatever you wanted if it worked for your build, and that was really cool. I liked that a lot, and the game was really hard mechanically too. There were traps that would catch you off guard, there were people who would stab you in the back if you didn't roll a high enough diplomacy check, there were gods interfering with regular mortals, there was, you fought Tiamat at the end, all that stuff. It's like the complete D&D experience. And of course, everyone took the story very seriously, but at the same time, it was also expected that you try to build a powerful character and come to the session understanding how your character worked and then play well. And so this kind of really, and this was true with my Dragon Age campaign as well, and this really set the stage for me with what I expect out of my tabletop RPGs and what I want to play. I want to play a game, I want to play essentially a war game in which a dungeon master, game master person has built these really intricate mechanical challenges, and then I have to build my character and play my character to handle them very well. And I like to play with other people who also like to play that way, and I like it when it has deep stories. For me, D&D is still a war game, and then you also just have to have an epic story to go with it. But there's a lot of people these days who kind of who don't really like the mechanical side of D&D, and I'm kind of confused as to why they're playing D&D. This isn't a knock on them, of course. Like, you can do what you want. I don't care if you want to play D&D, but it just seems like you don't like it that much, you know? Like, and I think I've got a theory that this started with Critical Role. If you don't know, Critical Role is a big series DM'd by Matt Mercer, big famous voice actor, and with a bunch of voice actor friends on Geek Ascendry. And they've done this whole campaign world, and it's gotten so big that Wizards of the Coast has released an actual source book called Tales from Exandria about it. And it's getting its own TV show, and they think they also do stuff for charity and stuff. And I've watched like the first 50 episodes or so of the first season, and the first couple of episodes of the second season, and it's great. And I think it's a really magical experience. Matt Mercer is a great DM. He runs fabulous, tight, theatrical content, and I think that that's wonderful. But there are a lot of people who've gotten into Dungeons & Dragons because of Critical Role, and now they all seem to play the game and have expectations of the game that are very story focused, and that's fine. It's wonderful if you want to run a story focused game. But then they're like, oh yeah, I just, feats, I don't like to use them. Flanking strategy, why would you have any of that? Why would you min-maxing your character? That's bullshit. Stupid power gamers ruining our games. And I'm like, but mate, like, that's like, the mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons lend themselves to you min-maxing your characters. If you want. And so I don't feel like these people actually like Dungeons & Dragons. If you want to play a game that is like, here's the story, it's this really deep, incredible story, and you don't really want the mechanics, you don't like how Dungeons & Dragons does health, if you don't like the way Dungeons & Dragons does spells, if you don't like the way that Dungeons & Dragons does races, that's a huge thing on Twitter right now, especially with Tasha's Cauldron coming out. I've listened to the discourse. I feel like your opinions are valid and you're cool. If that's what you think, that's fine. But you know what you could do? Just not play Dungeons & Dragons. There are so many tabletop RPGs out there. Have you ever heard of Fate? Fate lets you roll cool dice, and then and then to put more effort in something, you gotta put more effort into something, but anytime you fail or succeed really well, you get better. And then and it rewards you, and it also rewards you for purposefully failing if it makes a more interesting story. That sounds like a game that people who like theatrical Dungeons & Dragons, who don't like playing with the rules of Dungeons & Dragons, would really like. They should try playing Fate. Also, Fate doesn't have colonialist, racist implications, so there you go, because it doesn't have a setting, so or you could try, I don't know, like Dungeon World, or Ryutama. You know what Ryutama is about? It's a Japanese pen and paper RPG, so they would call it a PNP RPG as opposed to us, which we would call it here in the West a TTRPG. Anyway, that's a side cultural note. You know what that's about? It's about traveling around and eating good food and occasionally warding off Neko goblins. That's cute. That sounds like something that people would like because they don't want to focus on, on the mechanics or whatnot. Ryutama is a lot more mechanics light. So, or Swords Fall. Swords Fall is an RPG that just has a setting and doesn't have any rules. You can do whatever you want. In that system, I think he recommends using the Genesis system. By the way, Genesis, that's another system that's very system-light. You don't all have to play Dungeons & Dragons. You could just play something else. One of the main challenges of playing Dungeons & Dragons, specifically at a game design school, is playing it with a bunch of people who all want to be DMs. That's really because a lot of people want to build their own campaigns and want to run like their own unique worlds, and that means you end up getting in a lot of games, and you don't have time to dedicate yourself emotionally to all of them, and it's rough. Another interesting thing though about this school is a lot of people didn't or have gotten into D&D over the last 5 years, which interestingly enough, I've also gotten into Dungeons & Dragons over the last 5 years, but I didn't get into 5e. I'm not saying that if you like playing 5e, you should continue playing 5e. I'm not bashing you if you start playing Dungeons & Dragons from Critical Role And like I said, that's just like my theory. My evidence for this is like put together from observing people on the internet rather than like actual studies, so take everything I just said with a grain of salt. And I'm not bashing any of my fellow game designers. Y'all are cool. I'm glad that you guys all want to DM stuff. And I think it's really wonderful that you want to build your own worlds and build your own game systems. I would like to do that too. I'm guilty of this also. But it does make it a very different dynamic at the table in comparison to playing with a bunch of, for instance, like engineers who are here to make big numbers and occasionally experience really dramatic demon interpersonal politics. So, yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this little rant and this little me talking about some other games that exist. If you don't like the mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons, or you don't like the story implications of the Dungeons & Dragons setting, then there are lots of other tabletop RPGs for you, and you should play them. I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that bell, and I'll see you on the flippity flop.